Okay. Questions?
On the assignment online, the completion dates can change. We normally got 2 days differences.
So,
When's the assignment due, I guess, real question.
so it's due on Wednesday. No, sorry, it's due on Friday, with extra credit being Wednesday. So what did it say on the sign on the web?
I could be wrong, but I thought it said the email we got said it was different. Like the same day as the second.
Oh, that's the earliest submission date.
Okay.
Yeah. I would try to do it by then because it's preparation for the exam also. Okay. But so what? That's an email I sent in response to something. Okay. Yeah. Okay. It's what it says on the web. And if you did it early, that's good. That's the early submission date. Yeah. Okay. Other things? Uh, your last assignment will be due on Friday of next week. Okay. And I'm in two minds about what I put in that assignment right now. So you'll just see the details, on Wednesday. Okay? And that's also, and more important, that's the last day of submission for anything. Okay, and that's also the last day of submission for all the corrections. Okay, and that's 9th. Okay, and you have an exam on this Wednesday, the second midterm. There is no final. Okay, the whole idea of a final is to have a cumulative thing that makes sure that you know how to put everything together. And every time you do a new assignment, you're putting together what you've done earlier. So by the time you do the last assignment, you've essentially done that. So there's no need, because you have this project, for a final to test that part. But the second midterm will cover things since the first midterm. Okay, so the first midterm covered inheritance. So it'll be after inheritance. It'll be sort of the more inheritance part, and later, and till command objects. Okay. And it's not as if you can just forget all you learned before midterm. If I'm doing more inheritance, I'm assuming you know inheritance, right? So I'll try not to ask questions directly on the stuff that was done before the midterm, but you should know that stuff, and you will if you've been doing the assignments. Okay? But if there's something that you're really confused about and you want to just overview it, I'm going to try not to ask direct questions on it. Okay? And you guys have taken an exam, you have some flavor of kind of questions I might ask, and you have the second midterm from last time online. Okay, hopefully there's no problem accessing it, so you have some idea. You can use that as practice. Okay. Anything else?
Are you going to take away that first part again? It seems like the one that, like, this time you only put in code. Last time you asked that question, it's like, what's the difference between this?
So you mean, am I going to ask essay questions?
Yeah.
So I love essay questions. I really understand. I love it when you guys answer them. I hate grading them. Well, I'm not saying I hate grading it, but it just takes time. Okay, that's part of what I could ask. I don't know what I will ask, but I certainly want you to understand definitions and be able to produce definitions. Okay? So you're saying that last year I asked an essay question in the first midterm, and I didn't ask you guys essay questions, and you kind of feel cheated, right? Or why not again? I don't know. Okay. Other things? Okay, let's just finish off undo. And as I've said, and as you probably realized, things are getting easier. Okay, things are getting easier because what I teach is getting more complicated, but it's more complicated in that you're putting things together, and the complexity is in the way things get put together. But how things get put together follows a pattern, what we're calling design patterns. And once you understand the pattern, it's just a question of plugging your stuff in there. Okay. So, so this is an undo pattern we saw. And we left off at the undoable spreadsheet. We did finish this, but I just want to review this again. So the whole idea was that we have a BMI spreadsheet and we want to create an undoable BMI spreadsheet. And we're going to execute undo and redo from the object editor window created for the BMI spreadsheet. So we add an undo and redo command to the interface, okay, so that we get a menu to do undo. Okay? So if you have a very complex object and it's only the top level object that you have to put these undo and redo commands, because the sub-objects you don't access directly. Okay? And that's the interface. That's easy to define. And then we saw an implementation. And what we did was we used delegation. Okay, so we already have a BMI spreadsheet. We could inherit from BMI spreadsheet, or we could delegate to BMI spreadsheet. In general, delegation is more flexible. And in this particular case, we need that flexibility. So we go and have a link to a BMI spreadsheet that's not necessarily undoable. It could be undoable, but that, because of the interface we're using, but that kind of, if you already have an undoable BMI spreadsheet, it doesn't make sense to add undo over it. So, and we also use some object called the undoer, which will keep track of the history we saw last time, okay? And that will move through the history. And our constructor, in this case, takes both of them as arguments. And as I suggest in your assignment, you can assume that the undoer is part of a global, it's a static variable, a static property. Okay, that just makes things more convenient. It does make things less modular and flexible. But in your assignment, you're going to have only one simulation at one time, so that's fine. Okay. So we are implementing an extension of BMI spreadsheet, which means we must implement all the methods of BMI spreadsheet. The get methods have nothing to do with changing the state, so they're not undoable. So we just go and forward them on to the BMI spreadsheet we got as an argument. Okay, so that's freeware. And things get more interesting when we talk of the setter methods, because either these are ones that change state, and changing state is something we might want to undo. Okay, and we do something very much more complicated than you might have seen in delegation before. So we do want to execute the BMI spreadsheets set methods for each of these set methods. And we might want to execute them not once, but twice, multiple times. And so we just go and create a command object, which we saw last time. Just like you had an animation command object, we have a set height command object and a set weight command object here. And we pass the command object to the undoer, saying, here's the command object, and to the command object you give the object on which the set method has to be executed, and the argument. Okay, that's why it's a command object. So we don't go and so it will go and take this value, and it will go and save the current value, the command, and then go and to execute, it will go and execute the set method with this argument, and to undo, it will go and execute the set method with the saved value. Okay, so we saw that last time. Okay, and it's very important to go and pass to a set height the BMI spreadsheet. Okay, it takes any BMI spreadsheet as an argument. You could go and just do this, where you pass yourself, and then we saw this is where we left off last time. We'll just get into this infinite loop. So that's what we saw. Any questions about this? And what we have here is actually, what we've done actually here is implement many patterns. Okay? So we have the delegation pattern, if you call that a pattern, okay, that we have a link. We have an undo pattern. And what we've done is put an intermediary between the one who wants to use an object and the object that really does the work. Okay, this one is not really doing the work, it's forwarding the work. Okay, and we saw earlier a pattern where when you put an intermediary between the client and the server, if you will, the service object, we call that intermediary what? Adapter. Okay, and I use the analogy that you're going to Europe and you want to go and use your laptop, and you put an adapter that converts from their pins to the pins that your laptop experiences. Okay? Would you call this an adapter? It's doing things. And is it changing the interface? There we change the interface, right? Are we changing the interface here at all to the client? client doesn't even know, perhaps, that an adapter came in between. This particular kind of object came. Okay, so what would you, using your English vocabulary, call this kind of object? It's a term you see a lot, you hear a lot. So this is not an adapter. We're not changing the interface. Okay, we're not going from purple to blue. And what we're doing is just keeping the same interface and using a proxy. Okay? So we'll call the object on which you're invoking methods as the subject. Okay? And in between the subject and the client is the proxy. Okay? And so proxy is a class that sits between a client and a subject class offering the same interface. So again, going to the electric analogy, the power supply kind of analogy, the answer away. What would be a physical analog of adapter in proxy? Again, using the electric analogy. Yeah.
Would the proxy be like a search protector?
I kind of gave the answer away when I said power supply, but yeah, a surge protector, voltage stabilizer, whatever. Okay, it's offering the same interface, but you're adding more functionality. Okay, so the stand-in for a real subject. Methods called in subject through proxy methods. Okay, it does not change the behavior of the subject method. It's not as if you change the behavior, you add to that behavior. Okay, and like a regulated power supply or one with a special fuse. Okay, surge protectors. So proxy in everyday apps. So you guys hear about proxies in what context in computer science? Networking. So what kind of proxies do you hear of? Whenever you add a proxy, you're saying, I'm adding functionality, right? So you say, okay, I'm this kind of proxy or that kind of proxy. And why do you have proxies in networking? That's kind of asking the same question in a different way. Security. Okay, they can do some checks before allowing the operation to happen. Performance. Okay, maybe the
Obtaining access to some intranet.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a segmented group of network computers that you don't have access to. There could be a proxy that connects to the standard internet, and you can get access to the subset
through the proxy. So here he was talking of removing access. You want to give access, more access. Okay, you can do that because sometimes. So the companies have firewalls. Okay, so what they don't like is a lot of traffic going from your computer. More importantly, they don't want traffic to come into your computer. Okay, and so what they do is they put certain computers in what they call the demilitarized zone. Okay, so that's where there are special computers that will go and check all the traffic, and you go through the DMZ to the rest of the world. And so yes, you can do a lot of interesting things. Okay, you can log actions. Okay, see what your habits are, send you good interesting ads. Okay, you can turn something that's not collaborative into collaborative. Okay, so when two people access the same browser, maybe they can start same page. Maybe their browsers can allow collaboration. Okay, cache data. There's all kinds of things, and of course we're seeing here undo redo. And at the end of the class, we'll be seeing assertions. Okay, so proxies that actually check that what you're doing doesn't violate some conditions. Okay, so we saw that we have delegation, we have proxies, and of course we have this very complicated undo pattern. Okay, and the example of that pattern is right here. So we had a BMI spreadsheet. From that we created a proxy called an undoable BMI spreadsheet, and that goes and has access to command objects, and command objects have access to, so it has access to an undoer, and the undoer has access to a command object, which has access to the subject. Okay, so we have a subject, proxy, undoer, and command object. Okay, and so that's sort of the general thing. We have somebody that executes. We have an undoable, that goes and that you execute through the undoable, so that you can undo the methods you execute. The undoable has access to an undoer, okay, which is something you don't write. Just copy the stuff from the PowerPoint slides right onto your, Eclipse, and you already have an executor. Okay, so you have to create an undoable, which you saw was a very simple thing. You followed a pattern. You just again, you just change, doing a cut and paste there. And the interesting thing, of course, here is the undoable command, and that's what you create for every write method, and the undoable command will go in. We'll go and call the appropriate method to execute and undo. Okay? Yeah. So could you use reflection? Do you want to do it? If you want to, be my guest. Okay? That would be good, actually. I mean, you can make errors. If you've noticed, Object Editor has an undo command in its menu, and it does reflection, so it does that stuff already. But feel free to do that. Okay? It's just a little dangerous to use reflection, because it is kind of painful. You take this code and you just have to do almost the same thing but change the set method. And so we could have done this all in a BMI spreadsheet, a single BMI spreadsheet. I mean, we could have just created, given this executor, we could have just done all the work in an undoable, but we've sort of, delegated to. So this particular object is delegating to the executor, delegating to the undoer, delegating indirectly to the undoable command. So we just really decompose the problem. So if we had done it all in this particular object, maybe it's less understandable. But can you see other benefits of having this pattern rather than having a little bit more monolithic program? So why do we decompose things? Maybe it becomes clearer, maybe not also, because things get just broken up and you have to know the relationship between the objects. So it gets hard to understand how they all connect to each other. But what's the main reason, economic reason, if you will? Let's assume people can all understand easily, of breaking up things into multiple objects.
I guess you break it up into kind of like a model where you break up communication and actions, I guess, rather than having it all combined that way. For example, you want to keep the hierarchy of how you call the updater, but you want to change it to do the
So that's the whole idea, right? The boombox versus the the custom system, that you can go and buy both speakers and you can use somebody else's amplifier, and you can change one without changing the other, right? And always putting up the system is complicated. Boombox just turn on and it works, right? So that's the that's the advantage. So what might you want to change here? So that's in theory. So that you want to break up. You only want to break up the code into two parts if one part can exist without the other part being exactly the same. Okay? Model view controller, the model can exist without a particular specific kind of view. In fact, it can exist without any view. Okay, so you say, okay, I'll change this text view to a graphics view and so forth. So whenever you can change one part without, changing the other, you want to break them up. Okay, if they're so intertwined that whenever you change this, you have to change this also, then, maybe you don't break it up. Okay, so what might you want to change here? So that means keep something constant and change something else. Yeah.
You could limit the amount of commands that could be undone, or some.
So all of you have used this Paint program that you told me about. So you could limit it, and you could even change the interface. You could go from a last command, oh, I've got a last command undoer here. I really meant history undoer. Okay, so we had a history undoer. We can go from history undoer to a last command undoer, which is the VI semantics I told you that VI came originally with. You type U, it undoes the last command. You do U again, it undoes the undo command. Okay, so you can change the undoer on you. What else can you undo or change? Undo also in some sense, yeah.
Sometimes programs that you like YouTube will have an extension that for you on and
Okay.
show you what happens.
So that's another reason we're changing this particular object, right? This particular object. Okay. Now how about let's keep this constant. Okay. So that's good. You can do a lot of fancy stuff. There's a lot of undo semantics. So you really do want this undoer to be a separate object. Okay. How about keeping this constant and changing something else? Does that make sense?
not if there's a speed.
Okay, so you would change the undoer again, right? You would change the undoer to do some kind of filtering?
Well, could you do that in the undoable? Or would you?
Okay, so just don't send some commands to the undoer.
Send only specific commands.
Send only specific commands to the undoer. And that's essentially what I'm doing in your assignment, right? I said, look, just undo. I think I'll ask you to undo only one command. Maybe I'll ask you to undo more than one. Because you know how to undo one, you can undo the others. Okay? So you may want to, so you're keeping the executor constant, you're keeping the undoer constant, and you're changing the undoer. Okay? How about changing both of them? Changing everything but the undoer. Isn't that what you guys are doing? I'm telling you, just take my undoer and you create, we've got an executor here and a different undoable here, and you've got different things. So we are keeping this. The biggest advantage here is that you have a common undoer that is independent of any object. Okay? So you can just use this undoer, and if you had put it all in the undoable, then I couldn't, if I had implemented everything in the undoable, then you couldn't have just taken my code and used it directly. You would have to extract it, you'd have to cut, copy and paste and change. Okay? Can an undoer be connected to more than one undoable? You're nodding.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be.
In your project, does that make sense? No? You could be undoing the chat history. You could be undoing avatar movement. You'd still be using a single undoer. In fact, that's what happens in Word. You've got so many different objects in there. And there's one undo command and one undoer that's keeping one history. Okay, it's not as if you have a history for each little part. Okay, you don't have a separate undoer for the chat history, another undoer for the avatar. You just have one undoer in which there are many undoables perhaps in that. Okay? Anything else? So we've changed the undoable here. Have we? We've changed looks like we've changed the undoer. We've gone to the history undoer. So this slide's wrong. Sorry about this. Now I'm changed from history undoer to this undoer. I think I copied. About, and now we've gone to so now we've gone to same undoer with multiple kinds of models, multiple executors. So we have an undoable BMI spreadsheet, and which is accessing an undoable BMI spreadsheet and undoable point accessing a point. Okay, so this is what I was talking about. So this is just saying in slow motion what I said earlier. Okay. Anything? Any questions about this before I end? Okay, so I'm going to stop at this. Not sure the point of this slide was. I think I just copied it somewhere and I forgot to delete it. Okay, let's just make sure we understand everything. So the user goes and says, let me try a lower weight. Okay, it's a funny thing to do before Thanksgiving, but let's say we are very optimistic and we're going to reduce our weight. Okay, so the set weight is called. What does set weight do? It creates a command object and gives it to undo. Okay, so it's just very interesting. I've told you about indirection. Don't do things directly. Okay, set weight could have called, the delegate set weight, but it says no. I'm going to first create a command object, give it to the undoer. Okay, what does the undoer do? It, does some bookkeeping and it goes and just calls execute on the command object. Okay, c.execute. Okay, and what does the command what does the execute in the command object do?
It calls that way in the original BMI spreadsheet.
In the original okay, so I guess I've gone back to this. Now we go and do the undo, and it's going to go and say undoer. I don't do undo. Undoer, you just handle the undo. Undoer goes and figures out what next command is to be undone. It calls undo on that command. Okay, and that command goes and calls the appropriate set weight method in the original BMI spreadsheet. Okay, so that's what happens here. It goes and says BMI spreadsheet set weight with the old weight. So that's what happens. So it's so many levels of indirection, but it all sort of works out. Okay, and the command is finally undone with 75 as the value passed, because that was what it remembered as the old weight. And redo, same thing, delegating redo asks undoer to execute redo. Undoer says, I'm going to pass the buck, and I'm just going to tell the command, you execute yourself. Okay, so and the command says, I'm going to pass the buck also, but I do know I'm going to ask the original BMI spreadsheet to do the set weight, but what I do this time is I go and figure out what the old value is and pass that old value to it, and that goes in actually. And what's interesting here is, this is the interesting thing that I said earlier too, that this command object may be be accessed multiple times. Okay, originally when you did execute, it went and called set weight for the first time. Then you said undo, so it calls set weight again with the old weight. Then you may redo it, which it means it calls set weight with the original value, and you may undo it. So depending on how much you can do undo redo, there's no bounds as to how many times these methods will be called. This is unlike the case with threads, where you just executed the method once and a command object once, and that's it. It was never reused again. Okay. Whereas here, because there's an undo, then you may redo, and so forth. And with redo, you don't have a special redo method in the command object. You just say execute again with the new value, and it's either execute with the old value or the new value, and you get the redo.